high school or elementary school. So not anymore highly educated people are leaving Serbia, which is an excellent sign for us. That means that we are doing a good job. If we're trying, if we're managing to keep the people and attract them, we're doing a good job. Now we're doing this in life sciences, particularly in biotech. But it's very important to build the infrastructure more or less similar conditions as they can get somewhere abroad. It doesn't matter where, but somewhere outside their country. But the brain drain, I mean, to go somewhere where it's more ambitious, it's a normal thing. Britain, United States, companies, startups are going to China. So, I mean, it's very difficult, to stop these processes.
A global melting pot.
Yes.
And you're
absolutely.
now very much in it.
Absolutely.
Well, moving on that point, at the International Biotech Future Forum held in Belgrade this autumn, you spoke of convening all these sort of global super brains, policymakers and investors in order, in your words, to consider what kind of a future lies in store for humanity with the development of new technologies. I presume you're talking about things like artificial intelligence that could go either way, good or bad. What's your vision of that future?
Well, the problem with the high-speed development of technologies is always, the legal framework, the ethics are lagging behind. And it's very difficult, really, to keep up with what's going on, particularly biotech, artificial intelligence, now quantum computing, because nobody can tell you where we are really going with a certainty, significant certainty. So we have to be cautious. On one side, not to stop the development of technology, because it's going to develop anyway. Maybe it's not going to develop here, but it's going to develop there. But we have to involve more experts from a legal point of view and ethical point of view, and to combine them with those experts from AI or biotech to at least follow what is happening and to make the possibility of interventions somehow not to end up on a bad scenario.
This is another crucial place, isn't it, where politics and science intersect, and where you have both hats on.
Yes, I can agree
wants
with
to
that.
let it go and see where it goes.
Yes.
The politician in you needs to be mindful of protecting society.
Absolutely. And communication with the society is also very important, because people, due to this very fast development of technology, are getting confused. And then from the confusion, they go to fear. And then, you end up with a loop that people are rejecting amazing tools and assistance that is ahead of us. But we have to educate. We have to educate kids how to use those technologies. We have to educate citizens what are the benefits of the technologies, and also what are the potential dangers of the technology in order to avoid it.
And of course, ultimately, looking into this murky and yet also exciting future, Serbia, you're happy to say, is pivotal in driving the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel it, you know, in my gut, and I see the results. It's not just the feeling. I see the results. The government has decided, you know, to give us a Ministry for Science, Technological Development, Innovation, full support, you know, to go full speed ahead.
Jelena Begovic, Serbia's Minister of Science, Technological Development and Innovation. Thank you so much for talking about it.
It was my pleasure.
The latest news as it breaks.
Al-Arouri is remembered as a Hamas leader who was keen on restoring national Palestinian unity.
With fearless journalism.
These people are being shot at, trying to escape from the relentless bombardment.
From the heart of the story.
Many people form long queues hoping for a meal, but with overcrowded camps and limited aid, many are left with desperate need.
President Biden says he wants a two-state solution for Palestinians and Israelis, but does anybody believe it's doable? What does Israel's war on Gaza say about U.S. foreign policy? And what are the long-term consequences for the region and the world?
A quizzical look at U.S. politics, the bottom line.
As the world is increasingly gripped in a mental health epidemic.
I was getting anxiety attacks every day before school. It was horrifying.
A 4-part series filmed in diverse corners of the globe asks big questions about how we can improve our well-being.
To remove those unconscious negative energies.
I've never felt anything like it.
And meets the people trying to make a difference.
We welcome people in and we offer them many things. Here, you can just be yourself.
Mindset, changing the way you think about mental health. On Al Jazeera.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth. With Puranam, and this is the News Hour live from Doha. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, a landmark case at The Hague, South Africa takes Gaza. We take a look at how the ICJ may help break the deadlock at the UN Security Council over Gaza. Meanwhile, the Israeli onslaught continues. 40 people are killed in an attack near Al-Aqsa Hospital.
Delivering humanitarian aid in Gaza continues to face nearly insurmountable challenges.
And too dangerous to operate, the World Health Organization cancels an aid mission to northern Gaza for the 6th time in 2 weeks. Delegations from South Africa and Israel have now arrived in The Hague for a case that is attracting worldwide attention in the coming hours. The International Court of Justice will hear arguments from South Africa accusing Israel of committing genocide against the people of Gaza. Israel will defend itself against these accusations on Friday. From The Hague, Step Vassen explains just how the case could be a game changer.
It's seen as one of the most prominent cases in the more than 75-year-long history of the International Court of Justice. 17 judges will have to decide if Israel is committing genocide, that is, deliberately wiping out Palestinians in Gaza as an ethnic group entirely or in part. The Genocide Convention was anonymously adopted in 1948 after World War II, a unified commitment by the international community to never let atrocities like the Holocaust happen again. South Africa decided to bring the case before the world's highest court after UN resolutions calling for a stop to Israel's actions in Gaza were either vetoed or ignored by Israel.
There is a compelling argument that genocide is being committed in Gaza on the basis that there is an annihilation or cleansing of a civilian population, and also the quotes of Israel ministers and generals of the army aimed to annihilate the entire population of Palestine from the Gaza Strip. Our founding father has been very clear that South Africa is not free until the people of Palestine are free.
Israel denies it is committing genocide, calling the case blood libel, a false accusation. They say history will judge South Africa. The Israeli delegation was not available to comment Wednesday.
Experts on international law call it ironic that 75 years after the Genocide Convention was adopted because of the Holocaust, it will be Israel that will be in the dock facing genocide accusations. The stakes here at the Peace Palace in The Hague are high because the UN court is the highest body the UN has to uphold international law.
South Africa has asked the court for an urgent injunction to stop Israel's military campaign. While cases at the ICJ usually take years, a decision on provisional measures is expected within weeks.
The prestige of the UN as a whole, as a system, is hanging in the balance here. This is a moment for the West to actually answer to the sanctity of international law that they have held so sacred.
ICJ or World Court decisions are binding, but the court has no power to enforce them. Recently, Myanmar and Russia ignored verdicts to stop potential genocidal acts. South Africa hopes that if they win, it will further increase international pressure on countries like the United States, who are backing Israel, to do more to stop the fighting. Step Fasten, Al Jazeera, The Hague.
And as we mentioned, the hearings of the International Court of Justice at The Hague are scheduled to last 2 days, with both parties laying out their arguments. Axel Zaimovic takes a closer look at some of the case's main highlights.
At the United Nations High Court, Israel stands accused of carrying out genocide in Gaza. South Africa has filed a 84-page document with the International Court of Justice in The Hague. It claims Israel has killed more than 17,000 Palestinians from October until December last year. Just on December 7th, approximately 1 Palestinian was killed in Gaza every 4 minutes. Entire families have been wiped out with no remaining survivors. At the heart of South Africa's legal argument is the strikes. The submission also includes inflammatory statements made by Israeli leaders. The Israeli president said it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true that rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true. The Israeli Minister of Energy and Infrastructure tweeted, "All the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. We will win. They will not receive a drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world." The Deputy Speaker of the Knesset tweeted, "We all have one common goal, erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth." The former head of the Israeli National Security Council said the state of Israel has no choice but to make Gaza a place that is temporarily or permanently impossible to live in. The U.S. must ultimately back even an operation like this, even if there are thousands of bodies of civilians in the streets afterward. and Gaza will become a place where no human being can exist. There are also examples of the destruction of Palestinian identity. South Africa's legal team is led by former UN envoy John Dugard. It compares Israel's act to crimes carried out in South Africa during the apartheid era. But proving genocidal intent is legally complicated. Israel's defense team is represented by the former head of the Israeli Supreme Court, Aaron Barak. He's denied all accusations and argues Israel's actions have been made in self-defense in response to Hamas's attack on southern Israel on October 7th last year that killed 1,200 Israelis.
Please be seated.
The case will be decided by a 15-member panel. Decisions are based on a majority vote with a leading judge holding the decisive vote in case of a tie. Despite calls for a swift hearing, the case has already been delayed by a week. A final ruling on the genocide allegations could take months or years, but legal experts say a decision by the court on whether to announce immediate measures might come soon. As South Africa hopes it will call on Israel to stop its war on Gaza. Axel Zaimovich, Al Jazeera.
South Africa's case is an unprecedented one, but the UN's highest legal body has been adjudicating international disputes for 78 years. Alex Baird takes a closer look at the role the ICJ has played.
The International Court of Justice, or ICJ, has been the United Nations' main judicial body since 1946. Its main role is handling disputes between countries, not individuals, and its decisions are legally binding. But it also offers legal advice to the United Nations. Despite being dubbed the World Court, the ICJ's role is more limited than the name suggests. It can only resolve disputes if the countries involved have recognised its jurisdiction. The court has 15 judges elected by the UN General Assembly and the Security Council. It's led by US Judge Joan Donoghue, a former State Department official, and her deputy is Russian Judge Kirill Gevorgyan, former ambassador to the Netherlands. They all represent different regions and legal systems, and it looks like this. 3 seats are occupied by African judges. Judges from Latin America and the Caribbean hold another 2. 3 are occupied by Asian judges, 5 are held by judges from Western Europe and other Western countries, and 2 by judges from Eastern Europe. If a country involved in a case doesn't have a judge from its region on the bench, it can appoint a temporary one for that case. According to the UN Charter, the judges perform their duties individually, not as representatives of their home countries. In its history, the court has seen 193 cases, including disputes over land and maritime borders and genocide. One significant case was between Nicaragua and the United States in 1986, when the ICJ ruled that the US had violated international law by supporting rebels in Nicaragua. But the US ignored the ruling and blocked enforcement action. Another major case was in 1993, when Bosnia and Herzegovina sued Serbia and Montenegro for genocide. The defendants were found not directly responsible. Alex Baird, Al Jazeera.
And these are live pictures now from the South African city of Cape Town, of a rally in Cape Town ahead of the country's Justice Minister presenting the South African case at the International Court of Justice in a little under 2 hours. That will begin. South Africa has seen ongoing rallies against Israel's war on Gaza. On October 7th, its government recalled their ambassador to Israel after October 7th over the military operation in Gaza. And we are joined now by Kenneth Roth in Geneva. He is a former Executive Director of Human Rights Watch, former Assistant United States Attorney. Mr. Roth, a real pleasure to have you on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much for your time. How Israel?
Well, if you look at the 84-page application, this was a very factually detailed, professionally crafted case. And what this case is about, I mean, as the introductory comments mentioned, genocide is not simply about killing a lot of people. That's sort of the common phrase. But in fact, the Genocide Convention, which defines the crime, has 2 key elements. One is indeed, are you killing many people? Are you imposing conditions of life designed to destroy the group in whole or in part? And the application describes Israeli conduct in Gaza that, fairly could be found to add up to those kind of predicate acts. But the key decision the court is going to face is Israel doing this with the requisite intent? Genocidal intent means the intent to eradicate in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. And, as the introductory comments made clear, there have been comments by senior officials including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, including the Defense Minister Gallant, which, are genocidal in character. But then there, of course, are many other statements by Israeli Defense Force officials that say, oh, no, we're just trying to target Hamas, not civilians. And so the court is going to have to parse through those contradictory statements. They're going to have to look at the action on the ground to see, does this killing add up to genocidal intent?
And the first lawyer to win requests at the ICJ for provisional protection that was on behalf of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the early 90s. He said that South Africa will win this case. Do you agree?
I think it's a very strong case. It's important to note, though, that what's happening today is not a decision about the final case. So the decision is not going to be, is Israel committing genocide? Rather, today it's an application for so-called provisional measures, basically a preliminary injunction to stop the acts of genocide. And so this does not require a finding of genocide. It requires simply a finding that there's sufficient concern that genocide might be being committed, that the court can order Israel to stop these acts. That's what this case is about.
And Mr. Roth, you've said that the Israeli government must feel that it has a weak case when it responds to South Africa's carefully crafted, factually detailed genocide charges with resort to, you said, the tired perennial accusation of blood libel, which is an anti-Semitic accusation when it's not true. But do you think that the hearing will be fair? The lead judge, Joan Donoghue, is a former U.S. State Department official. Just how much power does she have to shape the proceedings?
Oh, I think we're going to see, all of the 15 permanent judges, as well as the 2 temporary judges assigned by Israel and South Africa. We're going to see them, really probing the case. These are independent people. They don't represent their government. So they're going to be challenging both sides. Now, I would hope that the Israeli government doesn't just resort to, rhetoric before the court. I mean, if it just comes in and says, oh, this is anti-Semitic, this is a blood libel, it'll lose in 2 seconds. I expect probably what it's going to say is, no, we're only trying to target Hamas. Hamas is using human shields. But what it's going to have to answer for is, well, even if Hamas is using human shields, you, Israel, still have a duty not to fire at those targets if the harm will be disproportionate to civilians. You can't use, say, 2,000-pound bombs in the Jabalia refugee camp, which is filled with civilians. So it's going to have to answer those kinds of questions from the court.
And Mr. Roth, when the ICJ ruled in favor of provisional protection for Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1993, the US and NATO imposed a no-fly zone soon after that. But we know that even if the ICJ rules in favor of South Africa, it may not be enough to stop the war because other rulings from the court haven't always had an impact. I want to look at one significant case that was between Nicaragua and the United States in 1986. The ICJ ruled that the US had violated international law by supporting rebels in Nicaragua, but Washington ignored the ruling and blocked its enforcement. So, Mr. Roth, are you hopeful that any ruling at the ICJ, even if it's not respected by Israel, that it will be enforced by the other members who are party to the Convention on the Prevention of Genocide?
I mean, as you note, the court is a court. It doesn't have an army. It can't enforce its judgments on its own. It needs the UN Security Council to enforce its judgments. And there the U.S. could exercise its veto to protect Israel, as it's done so many times before. But if there actually is a finding that, provisional measures are necessary to prevent acts of genocide, that's going to be a very strong finding. It'll make it much more difficult for other governments to provide military aid or arms to Israel. It will be a real stigma. Here, Israel, a state built after genocide, built after the Holocaust to try to protect the Jews, if it is then found, at least preliminarily, to be committing genocide, that's an enormous stigma. And I think it could have real behavioral consequences that hopefully would help to save Palestinian civilian lives in Gaza.
Mr. Roth, thank you very much for sharing your experience and your expertise on the subject. We really appreciate it. That is Kenneth Roth joining us live from Geneva.
Thank you.
Let's go to our correspondents on the ground following the story for us. We will get Israeli reaction from Stephanie Decker. She's live in occupied East Jerusalem. But first, let's go to Hani Mahmoud. He's live for us in Rafah in southern Gaza. And Hani, how do people there feel about the case at The Hague? Do they have any hope that it will stop the violence against them?
Yes, well, so far a great deal of anticipation and support for the ICJ and the case led by South Africa across the Palestinian territories, particularly here in the Gaza Strip, despite knowing broadly that the decision that the ICJ can make some binding decisions, but it still lacks the power and the authority to enforce them, knowing that some of the actions required will end up on the table of the UN Security Council, and with the possibility of the U.S. going to veto that. But the fact that it's happening is historic for Palestinians, to bring the Israelis to the Israeli government or to the International Court of Justice, and to question them and to point a finger at them that they have committed crimes, war crimes in the Gaza Strip, as they were conducting or still conducting this genocidal war across the Gaza Strip. So far, a great deal of rights groups here and advocates across the Gaza Strip. They're looking at some of these hearings are provisional measures that are going to stop conditions in Gaza from worsening, but at the same time looking at an immediate action, which is to cease the killing of Palestinians as requested by the leading country, namely South Africa.
A killing that's very much continuing, Hani. Real concerns for the situation around the Al-Aqsa hospital, where it sounds like it's becoming even more desperate.